Townes Van Zandt, Nashville, Tennessee, 1984. In 1984, I was living in Nashville on Hobbs Road in the slums of Green Hills with my second wife, Jackie, and my stepson, Seth. Our house was about a mile from the famous Bluebird Cafe, and on nights when Jackie was traveling for work mostly, I'd grab Seth and drag him down to the Bluebird for a couple hours. I was not the most responsible parent, but that's another story. One night I walked in by myself. Jackie was out of town and Seth had a sleepover. That night, the studio musicians that backed up Emmylou Harris's recording sessions were performing. Studio musicians are some of the greatest talents in the world and never get the credit that they deserve. I was sitting there mesmerized by the range of styles and genres of music these guys were playing when Emmylou herself walked in. It wasn't really surprising because she hung out there a lot and that night wanted to support her guys. They called her up and she did a couple of songs, and while the band members were extolling her songwriting ability, she said, one of my favorite singer-songwriters is in the audience, Townes Van Zandt. She called him up on stage and they did a couple of songs he had written for her. Then she suggested that he play a few songs while the band took a break. I had seen him around, usually pretty much in his cups, but I'd never heard him perform and I did not really know who he was. He said okay and sort of shyly said, I will play a medley of my hit, a reference to Pancho and Lefty. Most people laughed, but I did not get the joke. He later made the same joke in the excellent documentary on his career. It seems he only had one hit to make the top of the charts. He picked up his guitar and began to sing Pancho and Lefty. I'm not sure that if it was the first time I'd heard the song or not, but immediately I fell in love with it. The crowd, on the other hand, seemed to be thoroughly familiar with it and generally chimed in on the chorus. About the second chorus, I caught on and began to sing along too, but I've always been moved and very affected by music. Anyway, I got choked up and had to stop singing as tears started to flow down my face. He only played one song, probably including his introduction and closing comments, for a total of maybe 5 or 6 minutes on stage alone. As he stepped off the low stage, I walked up and introduced myself. I told him I loved the song, particularly how he picked it and sang it. I said, you choked me up and made me cry. He seemed a little on the shy side and gave a slight smile and quietly said, you obviously haven't had enough to drink. I said, you're probably right. I've only been here about a half an hour. Can I buy you a drink? He said, he gave that little smile again and said in a low voice, hell yes, man, I'm a songwriter. I never turn down a free drink. I asked, what do you drink? He responded, what are you drinking? I said, Jack in the Black. Townes said, I'll have the same. I said, you're a man after my own heart. I was born in Lynchburg, and there's no whiskey on earth better than Old Number 7. I then called to the barkeep, J.D. on branch water. He commented they didn't have any branch water and asked if ice and distilled water would be okay. I glanced at Townes and he gave a slight nod of his head, and I turned back to the bartender and I ordered Jack Daniel and 2 glasses with ice with an inch of distilled water in each. The bartender set the glasses on the bar and reached for a fifth of J.D. As he did, he started to break the seal and take the cap off. I jumped in and quickly said, don't do that. I want the whole bottle unopened. The bartender looked at me puzzled and handed me the unopened bottle. I took it, and always being given in those days to the extravagant, grandiose gesture, I twisted the top with a flourish and threw it halfway across the bar into the trash can. The bartender's eyes got kind of wide, and when I looked over to Townes, he was showing that sly little grin again, and I said, I have never knew why they made caps for whiskey bottles, as I had no use for them. He laughed out loud and said he was of a like mind. We polished off the fifth that night and got to know each other a little better. He told me he is from Austin, Texas, and I said I'd been trying to place his accent. We developed a bond that evening and subsequently spent some casual time together and pursued the grape over the next few months. I would not say that we were really close friends. He did invite me out to his cabin that was located somewhere off of Old Hickory on the outskirts of Nashville, but I never made it out there. I saw him around the various haunts from time to time, and we were always on friendly terms. On a couple of occasions, I met his then wife, but didn't feel too comfortable with her, as it was clear that she was on a mission from God to rescue Townes and did not think too much of his drinking and drugging buddies, and that included me. Wherever I went, I never had any problem finding compatible people, that is, people who drank and partied all out the way I did. Shortly after, I realized my lifestyle was affecting my job at TVA, and I was recently married and have a 7-year-old stepchild. I was not happy at work and had the opportunity to go on loan to a project in India. I made a decision when I got back I needed to make a geographical cure and get the hell away from Nashville and all its bad influences. When I returned, I called the program director of TVA in Knoxville and told him I needed another job in TVA. I was offered a position in Chattanooga and immediately moved into a local hotel till my stepson could finish second grade and we could all move. I never saw Townes in person again. A decade later, he would be dead of the complications of drinking and drugs, and I would be just short of 10 years of sobriety. In an odd twist, about 15 years later, while doing some genealogical research, I came across a note that his ex was trying to find the grave of Townes' third great-grandfather, Captain Jacob Van Zandt, in Franklin, Tennessee area. I sent her a note that it wasn't Franklin, but rather it was Franklin County, and that I could direct her to the graveyard. Not too surprisingly, she didn't respond. I later learned that someone had corrected her error and she had visited the gravesite. That's how I learned that Townes Van Zandt and I were first cousins, 7 generations removed. Over the years after I moved to Fort Worth, where he grew up before moving to Austin and Nashville, I met and became friends with several of the local Van Zandt cousins in the area. All agreed that his was a tragic life and his death a terrible loss of a great talent. Thank you.